Have you ever witnessed a moment where everything you thought you knew about strength got completely turned upside down? Picture this: a quiet evening, a crowded restaurant filled with families enjoying their meals, the warm glow of candlelight reflecting off wine glasses. Then, in less time than it takes to check your phone, 5 grown men, each over 6 feet tall, each radiating aggression, are lying on the floor, groaning in pain and disbelief. Standing above them, completely composed, is a woman who moments before had simply been trying to enjoy her pasta. She picks up her wine glass, takes a sip, and sits back down as if nothing extraordinary just happened. This isn't fiction. This is what happens when arrogance meets discipline, when bullies choose the wrong target, and when a warrior in civilian clothes is forced to remind everyone that true power doesn't need to boast. It simply acts when necessary. What you're about to discover is a story that will challenge everything you believe about courage, justice, and the invisible strength that walks among us every single day. Diana Foster pushed through the heavy glass doors of the Seattle transit station, her duffel bag weighing heavy on her shoulder. 26 months. That's how long she'd been deployed overseas, serving her country in ways most people would never understand. The rain-soaked streets of the Pacific Northwest were a stark contrast to the desert landscapes she'd left behind, but the dampness felt like a cool embrace after years under an unforgiving sun. She wasn't looking for recognition or celebration. She'd declined the small welcome gathering her family had tried to organize. What Diana wanted more than anything was simplicity: a hot meal, a comfortable chair, and the absence of constant vigilance. The weight of her service sat heavy in her chest, not from regret but from exhaustion. She'd seen things that would haunt her sleep for years to come, made decisions that saved lives but cost her pieces of her soul. The streets of downtown Seattle pulsed with evening energy. Couples strolled hand in hand, street performers played guitars on corners, and the smell of fresh coffee mixed with the petrichor of recent rain. Diana walked slowly, deliberately, forcing herself to absorb the normalcy of it all. No explosions in the distance, no radio chatter, no weapons checks, just life. Her eyes landed on a warm glow spilling from a corner establishment, the Golden Fork, a family-owned bistro that looked like it had been transplanted from a European village. Through the fogged windows, she could see families gathered around tables, children laughing, servers moving gracefully between seats. Something about the scene pulled at her heart. This was what she'd been fighting for, these simple, precious moments of peace. Diana entered quietly, the bell above the door announcing her arrival with a gentle chime. The interior wrapped around her like a familiar blanket. Exposed brick walls, decorated with vintage photographs, mismatched wooden furniture that somehow worked perfectly together, and the intoxicating aroma of garlic, herbs, and fresh-baked bread. For the first time in what felt like forever, her shoulders began to relax. A young server approached, his name tag reading Daniel. He couldn't have been more than 23, with earnest eyes and a genuine smile that hadn't yet been weathered by life's harsher realities. "Welcome to the Golden Fork," he said warmly. "Just one this evening?" Diana nodded, her voice slightly rough from disuse. "Yes, please. Somewhere quiet if you have it." Daniel led her to a corner booth near the back window, where the view opened onto a small courtyard garden lit with string lights. "This is our peaceful spot," he explained, setting down a menu. "Can I start you with something to drink?" "Red wine," Diana replied, "and water." "Thank you." As Daniel walked away, Diana allowed herself to truly settle into the moment. Her fingers traced the grain of the wooden table, feeling its solid reality. She was home. She was safe. She was free to simply exist without purpose or mission. The weight of that freedom felt almost overwhelming. She ordered without much thought, a pasta dish with mushrooms and cream sauce, something comforting and uncomplicated. While she waited, Diana watched the other diners, an elderly couple sharing dessert, feeding each other small bites with the tenderness of 50 years together. A mother patiently cutting food for her young son while fielding questions about everything and nothing. A group of friends toasting to someone's birthday, their laughter genuine and unguarded. These were the moments that made everything worthwhile. Diana had spent years protecting strangers she'd never meet, but seeing these intimate slices of ordinary happiness reminded her why those years mattered. Every deployment, every sacrifice, every night spent afraid. It all meant something when she could witness scenes like this. When Daniel returned with her wine, Diana thanked him and took a slow sip. The wine was decent, nothing spectacular, but it tasted like civilization, like normalcy, like home. She let the warmth spread through her chest, feeling muscles she didn't even know were tense beginning to loosen. But old habits die hard. Even as Diana tried to immerse herself in this peaceful moment, her training wouldn't fully release its grip. Her eyes continued their subtle scan of the room. Exit routes, potential hazards, defensive positions. She noticed which customers seemed alert versus distracted, which tables had clear sightlines, where the kitchen entrance provided cover if needed. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival instinct, carved into her neural pathways through thousands of hours of conditioning. Diana closed her eyes and breathed deeply, coaching herself to let go. You're not on duty anymore. You're safe. You're home. Just be here, just be present. Just enjoy your dinner like everyone else. The pasta arrived steaming and fragrant, and Diana's first bite made her close her eyes in appreciation. Simple flavors done well, earthy mushrooms, rich cream, perfectly cooked pasta. It was the kind of meal that required no analysis, just gratitude. She ate slowly, savoring each forkful, letting the warmth and comfort seep into bones that had been cold for too long. For 15 glorious minutes, Diana Foster was just another diner enjoying a quiet evening. No rank, no responsibility, no war. Just a woman and her meal and the gentle hum of human life continuing around her. It was perfect. Then the door opened. The sound itself wasn't alarming, just the familiar chime of the entrance bell. But Diana's instincts picked up on something else, the change in atmosphere. Conversations nearby faltered. A mother instinctively pulled her child closer. The elderly couple's gentle chatter ceased mid-sentence. 5 men entered in a tight group, their movements uncoordinated and loud. Even from across the room, Diana could smell the alcohol, not the pleasant aroma of wine, but the sharp, acrid stench of hard liquor consumed in excess. Their voices carried aggressive undertones, that particular frequency that signals danger to anyone paying attention. Diana's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Every muscle in her body shifted from relaxation to readiness, though outwardly she remained perfectly still. She watched them through her peripheral vision, cataloging details with practiced efficiency. All 5 were large men, easily over 6 feet and well-built. Their expensive clothing and watches marked them as privileged, but their swagger, their careless disregard for personal space, and the way they laughed too loudly at nothing, these were the hallmarks of men who'd never faced real consequences. Vincent, the restaurant's owner, appeared from behind the bar. He was a stocky man in his 60s, with kind eyes that now showed concern. Diana could see him calculating the same thing she was. These men represented potential chaos in a place built on peace and comfort. "Gentlemen, welcome," Vincent said, his Italian accent thick but his English clear. "I have a nice table for you over here." "We'll sit where we want," one of them interrupted, his words slurred, but his tone sharp. The group laughed as if this was the height of wit. Vincent's jaw tightened, but he maintained his professional demeanor. "Of course. Please, this way." They followed him to a large table near the center of the dining room, the worst possible location for containing a disturbance. Diana set her fork down carefully, her appetite suddenly gone. She'd seen this dynamic countless times in overseas bars where soldiers went to blow off steam. Men with too much alcohol, too much testosterone, and too little supervision rarely made good decisions. For a few minutes, the restaurant tried to maintain its rhythm. Conversations resumed, though more quietly. Children were kept closer to their parents. Daniel approached the men's table with visible reluctance, his earlier ease replaced by tension. Diana forced herself to continue eating, but her focus had shifted entirely. She was no longer a civilian enjoying dinner. She was back in tactical mode, running scenarios, calculating angles, preparing for possibilities she desperately hoped wouldn't materialize. The men ordered drinks, more alcohol, despite clearly having reached their limit. Their voices grew louder with each passing minute, their jokes cruder. Diana watched a young couple at a nearby table exchange uncomfortable glances before quietly asking for their check. A family with 2 small children did the same moments later. The atmosphere in the Golden Fork had transformed. What had been warm and welcoming now felt charged and fragile, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see if the situation would diffuse or explode. One of the men stood abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. He stretched with exaggerated motion, his eyes scanning the room with the predatory focus of someone looking for entertainment. Diana recognized that look. She'd seen it in soldiers who'd been away from home too long, in civilians who confused strength with dominance, in bullies of every stripe who sought out targets to validate their fragile egos. His gaze swept past families, past couples, past the elderly pair who'd been sharing dessert. Then it landed on Diana, sitting alone in her corner booth. Their eyes met for a split second before Diana deliberately looked away, returning her attention to her plate. It was a calculated move, showing neither fear nor challenge, just disinterest. In her experience, most bullies moved on when they didn't get an immediate reaction, but alcohol had its own logic. "Hey!" the man called out loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "Hey, you over there, the lady eating alone." Diana didn't respond. She took another bite of pasta, chewing slowly, her face a mask of calm indifference. But inside, her heart rate had slowed, her breathing had deepened, and every nerve ending in her body had come alive with readiness. "I'm talking to you," he persisted, his voice growing more insistent. His friends laughed, encouraging him. "Don't be rude. It's not polite to ignore someone when they're talking to you." Daniel appeared at the man's shoulder, his voice shaking slightly. "Sir, please return to your table. This guest would like to enjoy her meal in peace." The man turned on Daniel with such sudden aggression that the young server stumbled backward. "Did I ask you, kid? Mind your own business before you get hurt." Vincent moved quickly, placing himself between Daniel and the aggressor. "Signore, please. This is a family establishment. There are children here. Let's all calm down and enjoy our evening, yes?" For a moment, it seemed like Vincent's calm authority might work. The man hesitated, looking back at his friends who were watching with anticipation. Diana could see the calculation happening behind his alcohol-fogged eyes, back down and lose face, or escalate and prove his dominance. Pride won. "Nah," he said, pushing past Vincent with enough force to make the older man stagger. "I think the lady and I need to have a conversation." Diana finally looked up, meeting his gaze directly. Her expression was perfectly neutral, her voice quiet but clear enough to carry. "I don't want to talk. Please go back to your table." It was reasonable, it was direct, it was the kind of boundary any rational person would respect. But these men weren't rational anymore. "Oh, she speaks," he announced to his friends, who erupted in laughter. He approached her booth, his massive frame blocking the light. "See, that wasn't so hard. Now, why don't you be friendly and come join us? Pretty lady like you shouldn't eat alone." "I prefer eating alone," Diana replied, her tone unchanged. "Thank you for the offer." She could smell the whiskey on his breath now, see the way his pupils had dilated, notice the slight sway in his posture. He was deeply intoxicated, but still coordinated enough to be dangerous. Behind him, his four friends had risen from their table, sensing entertainment. This was the critical moment. Diana knew from experience that how she handled the next 30 seconds would determine whether this ended peacefully or violently. She had to walk the razor's edge between showing enough strength to make him think twice, but not so much aggression that his pride forced him to attack. "Look," she said, keeping her voice even, "I just want to finish my dinner. You want to have a good time with your friends. Those are both reasonable things. Let's both do that." It was the perfect de-escalation script. Acknowledge both parties' desires, offer a path where everyone saves face, create space for the situation to diffuse naturally. The man stared at her for a long moment. Diana could see the gears turning, alcohol fighting with some buried instinct for self-preservation. She held her breath, hoping he'd make the smart choice. Then one of his friends called out, "Come on, man! Don't let some chick dismiss you like that." The words hit like gasoline on embers, the man's face flushed with renewed anger, his jaw clenching. "You think you're better than us? Too good to be social." Diana sighed internally. She'd done everything right, but sometimes everything right wasn't enough. Sometimes violence came anyway, not because it was necessary, but because damaged egos needed it. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," Diana said carefully. "I just want to eat my dinner in peace. Last chance. Walk away now and everyone goes home happy." The man leaned down, placing both hands on her table, his face inches from hers. Or what? That was the moment Diana Foster stopped being a civilian, trying to enjoy a quiet evening. In that instant, years of training, countless hours of combat drills, and the survival instincts honed through real combat situations took over. Her expression didn't change, but everything inside her had shifted to full operational mode. "Or you'll regret it," she said quietly. He laughed, a harsh bark devoid of humor. Then he reached for her arm. What happened next would be replayed on dozens of phones, analyzed frame by frame on social media, and discussed in military training courses for years to come. The moment his hand touched Diana's wrist, her body moved with a speed and precision that seemed impossible. She twisted her arm in a practiced joint lock, applying pressure to the exact points that maximized pain and compliance. The man's knees buckled instantly as agony shot through his nervous system, and Diana used his momentum to drive him face first into the table. The impact was controlled but devastating, leaving him dazed and compliant. His nearest friend lunged forward, hands reaching for Diana. She'd already anticipated this. People always tried to help their friends, and alcohol made them predictable. Diana released the first man, pivoted smoothly, and caught the second man's incoming arm. Using his own weight and momentum, she redirected him into his fallen companion. Both men crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs. The third man approached from her blind side. A smart move, except Diana didn't have blind sides. Years of combat training had taught her to maintain 360-degree awareness. She sensed, rather than saw his approach, spun low, and swept his legs out from under him. He fell hard, the back of his head cracking against the floor with enough force to disorient him completely. The fourth and fifth men attacked simultaneously, finally showing some coordination. They came from opposite directions, clearly intending to overwhelm her with numbers. Diana didn't panic. She'd trained for exactly this scenario hundreds of times. She positioned herself so that one attacker blocked the other's approach, forcing them to attack sequentially rather than simultaneously. The fourth man swung wildly, his technique sloppy from intoxication. Diana didn't need to block. She simply wasn't where his fist was aimed. She sidestepped, grabbed his extended arm, and used a simple leverage technique to flip him over her hip. His body crashed into a nearby chair, splintering wood and sending dishes flying. The fifth man, seeing four of his friends dispatched in seconds, hesitated. That hesitation was his downfall. Diana closed the distance between them in 2 quick steps, struck a precise nerve cluster in his shoulder that temporarily paralyzed his arm, then swept his legs. He joined his friends on the floor. Total elapsed time, 14 seconds. The restaurant was absolutely silent. Not a fork clinked, not a breath was taken. Every eye was fixed on the corner booth where Diana Foster stood, completely composed, not even breathing hard. 5 large men lay groaning at her feet, their expensive clothes rumpled, and their pride shattered along with several pieces of furniture. Diana calmly picked up her wineglass, which had miraculously remained upright through the entire encounter. She took a small sip, her hand perfectly steady, then set it back down. "I did warn them," she said to no one in particular. The spell broke. Someone started clapping. The elderly man who'd been sharing dessert with his wife. The applause spread quickly, growing from a few tentative claps to thunderous approval. Families, couples, servers, even Vincent behind the bar joined in, their faces showing a mixture of shock, relief, and admiration. Daniel stood frozen, his mouth hanging open. "How did you... What did you... Who are you?" Diana looked at him, a small smile finally cracking her composed exterior. Just someone who wanted a quiet dinner. But Vincent, who had seen many things in his 60-plus years, recognized something in Diana's bearing, in the precise way she'd moved, in the controlled violence that had appeared and disappeared like a thunderstorm. He approached cautiously, his voice filled with respect. "You are military, yes? You have the training?" Diana nodded slowly. "Navy. Just returned from deployment overseas." Understanding rippled through the crowd. The whispers started. "She's a soldier. She was in the military. That's why she moved like that." One of the men on the floor, the first one she'd taken down, groaned and tried to sit up. His face was flushed with humiliation and residual pain. "You crazy! You broke my arm." "It's dislocated, not broken," Diana corrected calmly, "and I gave you multiple opportunities to walk away. You chose this." The man started to protest, but Vincent cut him off sharply. "No! You harassed my guest. You threatened my staff. You created chaos in my establishment. You are lucky she showed restraint. A less disciplined person might have hurt you much worse." Diana's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Several people had already posted videos of the incident online. By morning, it would be everywhere. She sighed. So much for a quiet return to civilian life. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Someone had called the police, probably when the confrontation first began. Diana remained standing, her posture relaxed, but ready. She'd been through enough military-police interactions to know the protocol. Stay calm, explain clearly, let the evidence speak. The officers arrived with practiced efficiency, 6 of them, hands near their weapons, until they could assess the situation. The lead officer, a tall woman with sergeant's stripes, took in the scene with sharp, experienced eyes. 5 men on the floor, 1 woman standing, a restaurant full of witnesses with phones out. "Who wants to tell me what happened here?" the sergeant asked. Before Diana could speak, Vincent stepped forward, his Italian accent thick with emotion. "These men came in drunk, harassed my guests, threatened my staff, and attacked this young lady. She defended herself. Everyone here saw it. We have security cameras. We have witnesses. She did nothing wrong." Daniel nodded vigorously. "She asked them multiple times to leave her alone. They kept pushing. They grabbed her first." A mother holding her young daughter added, "She protected all of us." Those men were dangerous. The sergeant looked at Diana, her eyes sharp but not unsympathetic. "And you are?" "Diana Foster, United States Navy," Diana replied, her military bearing automatic. "I was eating dinner when those 5 men began harassing me. I attempted verbal de-escalation multiple times. When physical contact was initiated, I defended myself using appropriate force. The sergeant's expression shifted slightly. Recognition of a fellow service member, respect for proper procedure. Are you injured? No, ma'am. Are any of them seriously injured? Diana shook her head. Minor contusions, possibly a dislocated shoulder on the first subject. I used controlled techniques designed to neutralize threats without causing permanent damage. One of the men on the floor snarled. She attacked us for no reason. We were just trying to be friendly. The sergeant's expression hardened. She turned to her officers. Check every phone in this restaurant. I want to see all footage, and someone pull that security camera feed. Within minutes, the truth was undeniable. Video from multiple angles showed the entire encounter, the men's aggressive approach, Diana's repeated attempts to defuse the situation, the first man grabbing her wrist and her lightning-fast response. Frame by frame, it demonstrated textbook self-defense. The sergeant watched the footage, then looked at the 5 men with undisguised contempt. You're all under arrest for assault, harassment, and disturbing the peace. Start reading them their rights. As the officers handcuffed the men, one of them, a man with a designer watch that probably cost more than Daniel made in a month, sneered at Diana. You think you're tough? You have no idea who we are. Our lawyers will advise you to plead guilty, the sergeant interrupted coldly. Because every phone in this restaurant recorded you assaulting a Navy service member who showed remarkable restraint. If I were you, I'd save your threats and start thinking about how to apologize. Diana watched them being led out, their bravado deflating with each step. Through the window, she could see a crowd gathering on the street drawn by the police presence. More phones were out, more footage being captured. By morning, this would be international news. The sergeant turned back to Diana. We'll need your formal statement, but I want to say you handled that perfectly. Clean force, clear de-escalation attempts, proportional response. That's how it's done. Diana nodded, suddenly feeling very tired. I just wanted dinner. The sergeant smiled slightly. Well, you definitely made an impression. Stay here for a bit while we process the scene. Can I get you anything? My pasta's cold now, Diana said, looking ruefully at her abandoned plate. Vincent immediately bustled over. Please, sit. I will bring you a fresh plate and more wine. Tonight, everything is free. As Diana settled back into her booth, the restaurant slowly returned to life. But the atmosphere had changed completely. Instead of wary fear, she was met with admiring glances and grateful smiles. Parents mouthed, "Thank you," from across the room. The elderly couple raised their glasses to her in a toast. Daniel hovered nearby, looking at her like she was a superhero who'd just saved the world. In a way, she had saved their world, or at least protected it for one evening. The next few hours passed in a blur of statements, interviews, and questions. Diana answered everything clearly and professionally, her military training making her the ideal witness. By the time she was finally cleared to leave, it was past midnight, and the Golden Fork was officially closed for the night. Vincent walked her to the door, his eyes shining with emotion. Signorina Diana, you have done something remarkable tonight. Not just the fighting, that was impressive, yes, but the way you tried to make peace first, the way you used only what force was necessary, that takes true discipline, true strength. Diana shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I was trained to protect people. That's what I did. No, Vincent insisted. Many people with training would have hurt them worse, or escalated the situation, or let pride guide them instead of wisdom. You chose restraint even when you could have chosen revenge. That is the mark of a true warrior. As Diana finally stepped out into the cool Seattle night, she pulled out her phone. It was already blowing up with notifications. The video had gone viral. Millions of views, thousands of comments, hundreds of news outlets requesting interviews. Her face was everywhere, her name trending. She sighed. Tomorrow would bring a media circus, but tonight, walking through the rain-washed streets of Seattle, Diana Foster allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She'd wanted a quiet dinner, and fate had other plans. But in the chaos, she'd done something important. She'd shown that strength and restraint weren't opposites, that true power lay in controlled response rather than uncontrolled reaction. The 5 men who'd attacked her would face consequences: legal, social, professional. But Diana hoped they'd also learn something from their humiliation, that arrogance and aggression are no match for discipline and training, and that the person you're bullying might be carrying skills and experiences you can't imagine. As she reached her apartment, Diana looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, her fellow service members were still deployed, still protecting, still sacrificing. She'd returned home to find that the battles didn't always end with deployment. Sometimes they happened in restaurants, in daily life, in the small moments when someone has to stand up. But she'd stood up. She'd protected not just herself, but every person in that restaurant who'd felt afraid. And tomorrow, when her story spread even further, maybe it would remind others that they could stand up too. Diana Foster smiled, unlocked her door, and stepped inside. Tomorrow would bring fame she never wanted and attention she'd tried to avoid, but tonight she'd sleep with a clear conscience and the knowledge that when the moment came, she'd done exactly what she was trained to do. She'd protected the innocent, she'd shown restraint, and she'd reminded everyone watching that true strength doesn't need to shout. It simply acts when necessary and not a moment before.